welcome back to the podcast. This is episode 50, the big 50, the 50th podcast I've done. So it's kind of a milestone for me. And I'm really flattered at the success of the podcast, the responses from you guys, the ratings, the feedback I'm getting from you. It really makes it all worthwhile. Sharing my passion for dogs with you and being able to share your journey of dog training is super exciting. It's flattering to me that you chose me. There's a lot of other dog trainers online. I think that giving you a little bit of a different perspective on things with my work in shelters, with my work in competitive obedience, protection dog sports, which I've done as a hobby, competitive obedience, all the pet work I've done. It gives you a little bit, it kind of gives you the best of all worlds, because I do think that dogs are so multidimensional that it gives you such a great addition to your life. I mean, dogs have changed my life. They've made my life so much better. And I'm just so, they've changed my life so much. But what I want to talk about in today's podcast is a little bit more of a personal side to myself. So I want to share a little bit more of that with you, which I really don't do much, but it's something that I would like to do. And it came as a result of a email I got from somebody who wanted me to write about my personal challenges in dog training. Well, I've had challenges my whole life in so many different things. I was, born to two immigrant parents. I was raised all over. My father was in the Air Force, but that had nothing to do with the reason why I was raised all over. But my parents got divorced at an early age, and at an early age for me. And my mother and I moved to Germany. We lived there. We lived in a one-bedroom apartment with my grandmother, my aunt, my cousin, my mom, and me. So it was 5 of us, 4 women and me, which gave me such a strong affinity for feminism and women's rights and all that stuff. And even though I kid about things, I really do believe, and I really, have a great deal of respect for women. And sometimes I kid about it. I say, my mother's a woman. But I think in all things in life, you have to kind of take things lightly. And I've tried to do that. I've really tried to do that a lot. And my personal life really had a lot of struggles. I mean, I've dealt with immense amounts of depression. I've dealt with frustrations in my life, but my depression, my sadness, and the way I see things really has been something that's a real strong personal thing of mine. And I really have been able to deal with that better by putting it onto different things. So those of you who know me know about my martial arts background. You know about all the different things I've done, but really when it relates, it always relates back to dogs. I mean, I've done photography, I did bodyguarding, I did dog training, I've done, so many different things. Martial arts really has kept me focused. I did martial arts since I was 14 years old. I love the martial arts. I never competed. I never did anything like tournaments and stuff. I did demonstrations, but I never did martial arts in order to prove anything. I did it to gain something. And that's kind of the way I did it with dogs. Now, with dogs, I did compete a little bit. I don't like competition. I'm not a big fan of it. I just don't like being judged. But I did it. I did it to put titles on my dog, actually my dogs, Goofy and Maya. But I loved the training. To me, the training was it. Just like with martial arts, the training was where I got my satisfaction. That's what really made me and gave me this driving passion of what I really wanted to do and who I really wanted to be. So the reason I needed martial arts, I'll kind of jump into that for you guys, is when I came back to America, I was in first or second grade. So, we came back here. I didn't speak a word of English. It was my mom and I. We got on an airplane. We traveled across the ocean, came here, landed in New Jersey where my aunt and uncle were living, and we moved in with them. And it was my mom and I, and my aunt and my uncle. So he was like a father to me. My father lived in Rhode Island, so I did get to see my dad. I did have a dad. My parents were divorced, so I wasn't raised with my dad. So my uncle became a really strong influence in my life until my mother married again. But my Uncle Martin was an amazing guy. His wife Ursula, my aunt, my favorite aunt, I guess hard to say my favorite aunt, the aunt that had the most effect on me. She passed away last year. It was devastating to me to lose her. She was character. She was just she was the strongest woman I've ever met. She went through World War II, stealing food from the Nazis to feed my family, my mother, my grandmother, my other aunt. So anybody who went through World War II, in my opinion, is super, super strong. Now, again, I have a great deal of respect for all veterans, all military personnel, because they do something that so many don't do and so many people take for granted. So first thing I always say when I meet a veteran, and it doesn't matter if it's a veteran of Afghanistan or a veteran of World War II, Korea, Vietnam, anything, I immensely thank them for their sacrifice that they gave. And again, I came to this country, so I did live in other countries. I've visited many, many countries. I've lived in many countries, so I understand the benefit of being an American, the benefit of living in America, the benefit of the freedoms. It's the one country that if I ask anybody in any country I've ever been to, where would you like to go? Where would you like to live? They always say America. So I'm grateful for this life, and gratitude really has a lot to do with the way I deal with my depression, my sadness, and stuff like that. I kind of put too much on dogs. I put too much of a need onto them, that I really need them, and when they die inevitably, I'm lost. I'm completely lost. If you've never listened to my podcast on grieving the loss of a dog, then you should listen to that, because it gives you a unique perspective to me as the person I am. And I'm going to talk about my challenges in dog training, but I kind of want to talk to you about just challenges in general that I faced in life, because those challenges are what really made me who I am. So these insecurities, being bullied, being beat up, being picked on, of not speaking the language, of all these different things, overcoming those obstacles were huge. And I still tell you, I still face depression. I still face insecurities. We're all insecure. And I always say the greatest strength is in knowing our insecurities. And that I always put that in with dogs, because dogs have insecurities, and sometimes it can make them aggressive. It can make them act in ways that is not normal. And that's something that I really try to focus on with dogs, is getting to the root cause of things with them. But again, like I said, having this root in the martial arts was a huge thing for me. And later, I ended up teaching martial arts. I had a martial arts school in Los Angeles here, and it was a beautiful, big martial arts school. Did a lot of affiliation with the Sports Club LA, which is a really notable health club where a lot of very successful people would train. But my dojo never became that she Hollywood famous BS stuff, because I don't believe in that personally. I don't care about celebrities. I don't care about money. I don't care about any of that. I care about character. Character wins me over all the time. I've been around very wealthy people. I've been around very poor people. I've been around very famous people, and I've been around not famous people. It's never changed me, because I never buy into the hype. I just think most of the time people who buy into that hype end up sacrificing who they are. And that, to me, that would be the most depressing thing. That would be something that I couldn't even deal with. I couldn't deal with the aspect of losing that part of myself. So, by the way, all the equipment here I've gotten, I'm changing the way I'm recording the podcast and everything. I'm changing a lot of different things. So I certainly hope it works. I hope you like it. I hope you enjoy it, because I'm putting a lot of work into trying to get everything to work in a certain way so that it can be a really good podcast. I mean, over the past 49 podcasts, I've done everything from just an audio podcast to podcast, using my iPhone, podcast using a really good camera, podcast shooting it from my phone, from my computer, and all these different things. It's constantly evolving. I'm always trying to make it better, to give you guys more information about dogs and about life to help you. And by the way, when I say about life, I don't want to be your success coach. I hate that. I wrote a book about motivation years ago, but honestly, I come to find out that it's just complete BS. I don't even push the book anymore. I don't even know if it's still out there. It might still be out there. But, being successful is really just embracing that part of yourself and being content with where you are, but aspiring to do more. Not living for the future, living for when you're rich, when you're famous, when you're this or when you're that, is really being content in what you have and having a strong faith in that. I think, God kind of provides for me in a way because I have faith in that. I really, really do believe that. And again, it comes back to this acceptance that when you're a martial artist, you're a fighter, you live in the moment. If you look at great boxers, great martial artists of any style, great warriors, you've got to live in that moment. And that's what dogs uniquely do, right? They uniquely live in the moment, and they don't give up, and they don't fall into traps, and they don't think about the future or the past. But we do. We remind them of that. We always remind them, if the dog was abused, God forbid, that we are going to give this dog a reminder constantly. Oh, it's okay. You're not going to be abused anymore. Oh, you're acting like this because of blah, blah, blah. And whether that's true or not, whether the dog is acting a certain way because of its history, it's BS. Just like whatever your childhood was, if it was really, really great or if it was really, really bad, you have become a person because of that, but you're not caught up in that, right? So don't make that mistake, because that's where people get into the whole hype of, I'm this way because I was brought up poor, I was abused, I was abandoned, I was whatever it was. I was bullied, I had all these different baggages on me, but I never look at that as a reason for behavior. I look at it as a way past behavior, to understand things and to be able to move past them. So let's talk a little bit about the challenges in dog training. So let's talk about the challenges in dog training. Dog training, is a real, I consider it a communication with a dog, and overcoming challenges in dog training, whether it's with your own personal dogs or clients' dogs, your boyfriend's, your girlfriend's dog, your boss's dog, your neighbor's dog, or whatever it is really about getting in touch with yourself. So whenever you get frustrated, and I get frustrated a lot. And if anybody knows that, it's Janet. She sees it in me, and it comes from insecurity. So when I'm filming a video, one of the videos I'm going to post on the site, or when I'm doing a podcast, I start to beat myself up sometimes because I want it to be perfect. But I know it can't be perfect, right? It just made me think of this great story about this great swordsman who was making a sword for somebody, and when it was done, it was the perfect sword. And before he gave it to the person who was going to get it, who had purchased it, he took it and he nicked it. He put a nick in the blade. And the purchaser of the blade said, "Why would you do that? The sword was perfect. Why would you put a nick in it?" And the sword maker said, "Because only God is perfect." And that's kind of what I remind myself of all the time, that it's not in being hung up on this idea of being perfect, right? It's about this idea of knowing you're not perfect and just making the best of what you got. Staying comfortable in the place where you are, knowing you're not the best looking, you're not the richest, you're not the strongest, you're not the fastest, you're none of those things, right? And nobody really is. Nobody really is all of those things, because for the minute that you are, there's somebody there who's going to take it away from you. Look at the greats like Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Magic Johnson, great basketball players. Look at Phil Mickelson. Look at Tiger Woods. There's always somebody who's right at their tail to beat them. So when I look at dog training, I look at it as a relationship between the dog and me, and it's a communication and a relationship. And if I look at it like that, then a relationship has its ups and downs, right? So when I'm training a dog, there's going to be mistakes. And believe me, this is easy for me to say this right now and kind of spew it out, but it doesn't mean I don't fall into the pitfalls of being frustrated with my dog, of yelling at a dog or being upset. I can tell you not to do it, but we've all done it, right? We've all acted in ways that were stupid. We've all said things that were bad. The point is, when you see that, when you realize that, when you fall into that pitfall, it's time to apologize, it's time to own it, and it's time to do something better. So I've trained in animal shelters for 10 plus years, and have trained hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of dogs over those 10 years. And so many times I would be frustrated. Like, why don't you get it? Why can't the dog understand this? Why can't the people that I'm training understand what I'm trying to teach the dog, right? And when I get to that point, sometimes I'll yell, I'll bang my head against a wall, I'll get upset. And it's because in the animal shelter, I know that those dogs who don't get trained, those dogs who don't get the message are going to get killed, right? They have very, very slight chance of getting out. And I remember I talked about this with two other dog trainers, Danny, my friend Danny Craig, and another friend of mine, Oscar Moore, and they both said how frustrated they get with dog aggression. And it is because it sucks you in, right? So if your dog is reactive, and even sometimes Maya will get reactive on the street here and there with certain dogs, and then I catch myself getting upset with her. And I think, okay, you know what? Getting upset only adds to the problem. And that's a really critical piece that we don't understand sometimes. We don't understand that adding to the problem. So the dog is frustrated, you get frustrated. Now you just have two frustrated dopes who can't solve anything. The answer to frustration is to be the calm force in that position and do something about it. So when I see a dog in a shelter getting frustrated, usually because I've done it so many times, it's almost easier for me to deal with a shelter dog than a personal dog of mine, because I've seen it so many times, and I've seen this transformation so many times that I can really just apply a correction, work the dog, and move on and take the dog back out of the situation. That's because I've done it so many times, and I know that adding frustration to that will make the situation worse. Now, when it comes to my personal dogs, sometimes I think, man, I've known you for this long, and sometimes even Goofy makes a mistake. We were shooting a little video yesterday for my member section, and we were doing it down in motion. Now, Goofy has done it down in motion 1,000 times. We were at the park yesterday. I said, Janet, can you just film this? Because I wanted to use it for a promo for the lesson, and he kept messing it up. Now, granted, for the last 6, 7, 8 weeks, we've been locked down. He hasn't been out training. We've only done it in the backyard. The training has been, really benign. It's been nothing. Janet's been doing a great job training her dogs, but I've just done very little because Goofy needs a lot of space. He needs all these different things, and it's all excuses, by the way. But I got so frustrated. I'm like, why don't you get this? And it's because I expect more, right? I expect more of the dog than I possibly should. You should always, take this to heart. When people always say to me, are you disappointed that that person let you down? With people, I don't get disappointed, right? And I'll tell you why. Because people, I start off at a 0. Everybody I meet starts at a 0. And where you go from there can only be up. You can always go back to 0, but that's what I expected of you, right? So when it gets to a dog, I expect a lot from dogs. I expect more from dogs than from people, because people have notoriously let me down, and I'm sure they've let you down. So to keep from being let down by people, I just start them off at a 0. But when I have a personal dog that I've worked with for years and years and years and years, then I expect them to know things. But remember, they can have a brain fart. They can have, they can forget. They can overlook things. They can have a bad day. They can have an ache or a pain that I don't know about. They can have they can be somewhere else mentally. All these things can happen, which is why when you look at competitive dog sports, for example, it's really not common for the same person to win every single trial. In golf, it's not common for the same person to win every single tournament. I mean, Tiger can be on top in one, and he can, come in almost last place in another. He's still Tiger Woods, by the way, but he's winning a lot more than the other people. Remember, in baseball, and I don't know nothing about baseball except this is one analogy, that, if you go up to bat and you hit three hits out of every 10, you're batting a 300. So that means out of every 10, you're striking out. Every time, 10 times you're up to bat, you're striking out 7 times. So, it's not good to expect too much from ourselves and not to expect too much from our dogs, because there's always that constant evolving piece where there's that dynamic, and that dynamic can shift. We can have a good day. Like, why is it some days I wake up in a really good mood? Some days I wake up and I'm just trying to beat myself up all day. We all do it, by the way, right? It's moving past it. It's accepting it, accepting your weaknesses, understanding your weaknesses, embracing your weaknesses, and being your own hero and cheering up. Again, please don't start listening to this podcast looking for motivational stuff. I ain't that guy, not at all. So I'll tell you, my biggest frustration in dog training has really been clients' dogs. And I think it's when people put too much on a dog when the dog really is not capable of delivering what these people are expecting. I'll give you a couple examples. I had one client's dog. It was a pit bull. It was in Malibu. And the client said, my dog won't lie down. The dog just wouldn't go down. And I used the lure, and the dog would just chew my nail and chew my finger and chew, and it wouldn't do it. It would not go down. And I was getting paid by the hour. I was getting paid by the session. So I said, well, you know what? Let's make this our goal, that at the end of this session, this dog will be lured into a down. And, it's most people will give up just before the thing is about to happen, right? So I lured the dog, the client lured the dog, I lured the dog, the client lured the dog, and the dog would not go down. I mean, it just would not go down. Almost chewed my fingernail off, would not go down. Now, I didn't want to put a really immense amount of physical pressure on the dog to yank the dog down and show the dog what I want, because I don't think that's necessary. It's highly unnecessary to do that, because then the dog goes down in an aversive manner. And the reason most dogs don't go down is because they've always been taught to sit, and that's just what they do. That's just the way that dogs learn things, so they're going to end up doing that much more than they're going to go down. But anyway, so make a long story short, so I don't kind of drone on about one topic, but this dog, after 20 minutes, boom, the dog just finally went down. And it was literally like getting to be the end of the session. We were kind of way at the end. We couldn't get it. And boom, the dog did it. Once he did it the first time, he did it the second time, the third time, the fourth time, because you have to overcome that initial obstacle with the dog. Whether that's teaching a dog to bite, teaching a dog to recall, teaching a dog to leave it, or anything like that, you have to get it into the dog's head what you want. And then the dog can know it, right? The dog can't know it before they experience it and do it. But once they do, then they do know it. And if they know it, well, then it's really easy for them to do it. They can choose to do it. It's much, much easier. There was another dog that belonged to a woman, a very strong woman in Malibu, who it was a German Shepherd named Daisy. And Daisy had some real bad behaviors. She'd worked with another trainer. She got to me. The other trainer didn't know about e-collar work and actually made the dog worse on an e-collar than the dog was off e-collar. And we did a bunch of work with that. The dog had these tendencies to lunge at other dogs. And we worked together for a year or so, solved pretty much all the problems. And then the client ended up hiring another trainer, which ended up being a woman, because she wanted to see if a woman could do it better than I could do it, which I get it. I mean, it's a sexist type thing, and I was a victim of sexism at that point. But and that ended up messing up the dog. It really screwed with the dog's head, because they were doing way too much electric collar work on this dog. And I told my client, I said, listen, I saw her at the shopping center. And I said, look, if this doesn't work out, and I hope it does work out, but if it doesn't work out, call me and I'll help you fix it. And 6 months later, she called, apologized profusely that she didn't believe in me, and we got back together and worked with the dog. And the thing was, there was so much garbage put upon this dog that the dog ended up hating little dogs, because the dog would bite in the bark in her face, and then because she was starting to respond, what the other trainer did, they started stimulating the dog. So they would shock the dog. So the dog felt this frustration coming from all sides, and the dog didn't have a way out. So we had to re-counter condition that. And, pretty much it's always going to be a person's energy on a dog is going to skew the dog one way or the other. And if you're nervous and you're high-strung, and the dog is high-strung, then you end up with a dog that's going to do something like lunge out and bark and bite or do some damage. If you can kind of keep yourself calm and kind of be the calm in the storm, be the lighthouse, at shore, then you can rein your dog in. And that's kind of the training that we ended up doing with this dog. And she was a really great dog. I love this dog. I hope she's still alive. And a real similar situation was this other dog that I dealt with that belonged to another client, Malibu. And this dog would lunge at people and lunge at people and lunge at people. And every time this dog would lunge at somebody, the my client would yank the dog back and yank the dog back. And so I took the dog for a walk one day and I watched what she was doing. The dog would lunge at somebody and my client would yank the dog back. And then the dog got all whacked out and freaked out by that. And I said to the person, have you ever just let her do it? Just let her go up to somebody? She goes, no, she's going to bite him. And I said, well, let me have her. And so there was a guy walking up and I said, hey, are you friendly with dogs? He goes, oh, I love dogs. And the dog started lunging and lunging and lunging, and I just dropped the leash. But I don't recommend doing that, by the way, but I know a little bit about canine behavior, and I knew what I was looking at. I knew what the dog was about to do. And the dog just went up and was neutral. It did nothing, right? Was petted, was played, barked a little bit, jumped on the person a little bit. So in essence, the dog was just trying to get to somebody to say hi, and the negative behavior of trying to correct the dog out of it and thinking that it was going to be something bad or adversarial made the dog more and more frustrated. And if we wouldn't have fixed that, then eventually that dog, I think, would have really been a lot of, could have done a lot of damage. It was a big dog. So those are the kind of situations where I always find this challenge with people, that they don't really understand just this communication with the dog, is understanding the dog, understanding the body language of the dog, the understanding how the dog is acting and reacting to things, because that's what makes us better custodians of the dog, better parents, handlers, whatever you want to call that. And that's why I have such an issue with people getting dogs that might be too much to handle. And a lot of times those dogs are going to be dogs like Malinois and Dutch Shepherds and high drive German Shepherds, protection dogs. Super high drive dogs are super hard to live with. It's kind of like living with a comedian who's like living with Robin Williams, like a comedian who's always on, always on, always on. It's hard. It's very, very hard to deal with that. Or somebody who has severe mental issues or severe personality issues. Those things are very hard to deal with, but you must understand them in order to live with them. And that is what it's like living with a high drive working dog. They look great on TV. You watch them. You watch Goofy on my channel. You see these great, highly trained dogs, and you're watching a 10-minute, a 15-minute, maybe a 30-minute demonstration or a routine for the dog, but you've got to live with this dog for 23 and a half other hours. And the personality of the dog is really that way. The dog is really on. So, when I got Goofy as a puppy, it was super frustrating for me because I had, even at the time still, a Shar-Pei who was the easiest, sweetest, nicest dog on the planet. He was just the chillest dog. He's like Jimmy is now. So if you've seen videos of Jimmy, this was Silly. Silly was the same way. He was the nicest, easiest, chill dog that I've ever seen, that I've ever had. And I bring Goofy in, who was just like off the wall, just like biting, lunging, barking, flipping around, spinning, tearing through the house. And I thought, I've worked with a lot of dogs, right? I know dogs really, really, really well. What have I gotten myself into? And I really did, hone back to my zenness, my being at one with nature beast inside of me, and was able to really get this to work, because I said, look, we're going to take this day by day. Every day we're going to make a little stride, and every single day life is going to get better for both of us. And it did. And that's kind of the approach that you've got to take with your dog. So when you have a challenge with your dog, don't look at it like gloom and doom, it's failure, it's this, it's that. It's a temporary setback, but it gives you an opportunity to work through something. And I can promise you that if you work through something with your dog, you increase the relationship, you increase the understanding, the communication, and the relationship in how your dog and you communicate. And that's what really makes dog training fun, because it gives you the ability to communicate with the dog and cross these different bridges. And if you don't do that, if you just have a dog that does everything perfectly every single time, it doesn't give you that opportunity, and then you end up kind of failing. You end up kind of having a harder time in understanding success because you've never had a downfall. You've never had failure, right? Success is only really appreciated if you understood failure. If every single time you did something you were great at it, there wouldn't be a great feeling for it. It would just be the norm. The reason success feels so good, the reason love feels so good, is because you have experienced, not being loved. You've experienced hatred or disdain or being ignored. Same thing with dogs. If you have seen, God, he's not getting, and then they get it. And this is one of the things that I think is so great, because I've been so lucky in my work through YouTube and through my membership section that people email me and say, I just watched your video and I did it. I did it over and over and over again, because there are no dog trainers here in, Bangladesh or, wherever they are. And they get it. They make these huge improvements with their dogs. And that's what it is. Just stay in it, stay focused, and stay patient, and do it 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times, 5,000 times, and it will work. I promise you, 1,000% it will work without a doubt. So let's take some questions. First of all, if you like this podcast, I hope you'll run over to my site, robertcabral.com. Tons of great dog training videos, lessons, updated every week. I've put my heart and soul into this. I recently brought on an employee to help with the site. His name is Alan. He's doing a great job making the site even better, formatting it. You can, now see the lessons on your iPad, your iPhone, your Android too, I'm sure. But it's really a great site, and I think it'll help you really understand your dogs a lot and give you a lot better relationship with them. So here's some questions I got. I always like to do questions at the end of my podcast, because it gives you something to relate to, because it's maybe one of your questions. So first one goes out to Margaret, who says, Robert, you really make me laugh. Tell me what, and I don't try to make people laugh. I hope it's good. I hope you're enjoying yourself, enjoying the comedy routine. When is it a good age to start protection sports? Will this sport knowledge be able to be channeled into the real deal if it happened to arise? Example, I guess EG means example. One is threatened with your life. Obviously, having a gun is the best way to defend yourself, but all you have is your Malinois. Would the dog understand he still needs to go bite, even if person in front has no bite sleeve, bite suit on? Sorry if this falls under the category of stupid questions, but I'll take my chance. It's actually not a stupid question. It's actually a really good question, Margaret. But yeah, first of all, a good age to start protection dog sports is going to be early on with a good trainer. You want a trainer who really understands the best way to condition a dog to these things without putting too much pressure on the dog. The old school German trainers really started the dogs at about a year old, because there was a lot of pressure they put on them. Now, a lot of the newer guys, a lot of the guys working with Malinois, do start the puppies at 8 weeks, 7, 8, 9 weeks, 10 weeks, starting to get them on rag work, on getting pressure put on them, very fair pressure, so that the dog can take more and more pressure. The dog learns more and more confidence. So that can start early on. So there's no time that's too early to start your dog on protection sports. And will the dog bite? I mean, most of the dogs will. I mean, some dogs do understand that if there's a sleeve and a decoy, and the decoy throws the sleeve, usually the dog will go to the sleeve. They won't go to the person. But that being said, if a dog is feeling pressure and is feeling stressed or is feeling in danger, there is no doubt that the dog will bite, especially if it's been taught confidence over and over again. And that's what protection dog sports do. It's a really great thing to teach a dog, for a dog to learn, because it builds their confidence. It hones their natural skills. So I love it. I hope you do it. I hope you enjoy it. Iman Darag says, hi, Robert. I have a 7-month-old golden retriever that has a problem. I got her 8 weeks old, and she guarded her food and growled when we got close to her, but now she's better with the food. Now she's guarding her toys. If she gets anything from the yard and we can't put a collar on her, last week, my 22-year-old daughter tried to put a harness on her, and she growled and bit her, so she stopped. When I tried to take it off, she bit me hard. I thought of getting rid of her because I'm expecting a grandchild in September, and I'm scared she's going to be aggressive with him. She goes to daycare once or 2 times a week, and she's so good there, and everyone loves her. Please advise me on what to do, because she's brought a lot of happiness to our family, but I'm really scared of her now. Well, that's a tough question. I mean, I can't tell you if the dog will or won't bite a grandchild or a child, because the dog has shown propensity towards biting, but I don't know the situation around it. I would really try to get somebody, a balance trainer, to look at the situation and try to figure out what's going on, right? Why is this dog biting you guys, but she's not biting anybody at daycare? More than likely, the people at daycare are a little bit more nonchalant about things. A lot of times growling. My friend just got a dog and he's constantly telling me, oh, the dog growled at me. But sometimes dogs growl. If they see that growling can back you down, then it builds more of confidence and more of a likelihood that they're going to do that. If they see that you're not posing a threat or a counter threat, in other words, they think you're threatening them, then they growl, and then you pose a bigger threat. If they see that there isn't a threat, usually the dog will turn that off. So I would really consider working with a balanced trainer to kind of get to the bottom of it before you decide to put the dog down. I really, really would give them a chance on that. So Inbar says, my English is not very good, so I may have spelling mistakes. Well, that's just fine. I don't care about spelling mistakes. I have a 4-year-old dog, and lately she started to be aggressive to strangers. I think she's scared or trying to protect us. How can I teach her to stop this behavior? So every dog that has aggressive behaviors is usually doing it out of a reactionary thing. And if you look at my podcast that I just, my live cast that I just did the other day, yesterday or day before, you'll see that I talk about dog-to-dog aggression. And it's always something where the dog is insecure, the dog is sensing something, the dog is projecting something. The best way to stop aggression to strangers, obviously you should protect the strangers. I wouldn't expose her to it. I would try to work with a trainer. I would try to get some kind of a trainer who understands bite dogs, and probably would be a good idea to get somebody who does bite sports. Now, that being said, the best way to counter aggression in a dog is through obedience. Give the dog a job to do. You want them to do this, you don't want them to do that. If you tell him to sit and he gets up and tries to bark at somebody, you can correct the dog for that. It's a long thing. I talked about it a lot in that podcast. Please try to, the live cast, please look at it. And I'm doing another one coming up next week about human aggression. So maybe that'll be a good time for you to tune in, but it's kind of a long-winded question. Carlos, my puppy just turned 2 months. When do I start training my puppy? Today, Carlos, today. And this is the same question. I've had that question no less than 50 times, and it's always the same answer. Lucille says, I'm having a problem with my 7-year-old St. Bernard accepting my new 10-week-old St. Bernard puppy. Well, the reason, and I don't know if they're 2 males or 2 females or what their sex is, that's going to be a big issue. 7 years old is a good time to bring another dog in. So you did the right thing there. You waited. But the reason that he's probably having a hard time is because the younger puppy is probably getting in his face and is lunging, is barking, is growling, is doing all these fun things for the puppy, but it's a nuisance for the dog. And the only way you are going to fix that is to put the puppy in a crate, which I pray to God you've done. Leave the puppy in the crate, take the puppy out on a leash. Don't let the puppy nudge the older dog. If you can get them to play a little bit together for a short duration, maybe 1, 2, 3 minutes, and then put the puppy away. Show the St. Bernard that he comes first, he gets pet first, gets loved first, gets attention first, gets talked to first, gets walked first, everything. Then he should actually enjoy the puppy at some point and see that the puppy is going to really benefit his life. Ahmed says, very great man. I thank you so much for the awesome stuff we learned from you. One problem I have with my dog is that he chases football crazily. Just the sound of bouncing balls turns him on. He gets mad at the sight of footballs and usually doesn't listen despite my prong collar corrections. Any suggestions, please? Ahmed, what you need to do is you need to get the dog, you need to get the prey drive of the dog in check. So you're going to work on obedience. You're going to need to work at a distance. You need to get a friend who's got a football. And I'm sure I think you're probably talking about soccer balls because it's in America, footballs are like the egg-shaped brown balls. And football in every single other country in the world is a foosball, football like soccer. And what you need to do is you need to get your dog out in an environment like at a park where somebody's maybe 20, 30 feet away, do some obedience with the dog, use some luring, use some rewards, and let him hear that sound, give him slight corrections. He's going to have a really harder time if you're just trying to expose him to the sound of the football, the sight of the football, boom, he's just in front of it. That's going to be harder. So it's gradual desensitization will really help you on that. Queen V says, I referred to this video on a question I asked in your Q&A recent video. I was using this method for Shadow when he's barking. When you're talking here about the video where I teach Jimmy to bark and be quiet. So he follows the down, but at a down command, he is still barking. What am I doing wrong? So what we generally tell dogs to do who are barking too loudly is we tell them to down. And down, the dog should be quiet. And if the dog is not quiet on a down, I take the collar, I correct the dog, and I'll move them back away from whatever it is that's stimulating them and say, no, down. So in other words, I get them back up, correction on the collar, and I put them back down. Until they understand that down means quiet, I'm going to keep correcting them and moving away from whatever is stimulating them. Claudiu. I think Claudiu. Hello, the dog walks in front of me, and he sees a dog or cat or bicycles barking, and he's jumping. He struggles. It doesn't matter what I do to him. If I correct him with all kinds of collars, any advice, please? I'm sure I'm wrong somewhere. I'm sure you are too. I'm a 9-month-old German Shepherd. I'm waiting to answer you. Thank you. Okay, so what you need to do a lot of times, if you use things like e-collars or prong collars and the dog is in an excessive state of drive, you're pushing the dog further into the state of drive. So the dog can't, for example, if I said, what's 91 times 91? And you said, I don't know. And then I smacked you in the face 3 or 4 or 5 times. And I said, now what's 91 times 91? You're not going to know. So the dog doesn't know how to calm down without the stimulus of the prong collar, e-collar, choke chain, whatever it is, and they're all fine to use. But you need to teach the dog how to calm down. You need to teach the dog what you want him to do, and then ask him to do it, and then make him do it. That's it. It's as simple as that. But you need to take the dog, turn 180 degrees, walk away from whatever he's stimulated by, and this is all cats, bicycles, barking, jumping. All this stuff is all prey drive. It's all prey drive. Everything he's seeing is initiating his desire to hunt, chase, kill, and eat, right? That's just what you're not going to be able to undo that behavior. You're going to need to challenge it into something like obedience. Patricio says, love your videos. Thanks. How would you approach an aggressive bull terrier in terms of training? Would you muzzle him, e-collar, just to slip lead and teach him down, off, and come? Any thoughts? Thanks a lot. I would use any and all of those. I don't really use muzzles, but I don't know if the bull terrier is aggressive towards just dogs or if he's aggressive. First of all, you need to always be conscientious that no other dog should ever get hurt by your dog, by you being irresponsible, right? So if you need to muzzle him, you need to muzzle him. I don't use muzzles much because I feel that it creates another problem. But you might want to muzzle him. But a slip lead, or a choke chain is really the very, very first place I always start with dogs. I don't go to prong collars and e-collars on aggression because sometimes it can make it worse. Now, that being said, sometimes it can make it a lot better. Sometimes it can be a really clear way to communicate with the dog. So don't look at it as a doctrine, but look at it as a guide that the simple tool should give you an idea of the dog's behavior if you can get the dog, again, we're talking about all these people have the same question, about behavior of the dog acting crazy, and that's what you've got to get out. You got to teach the dog what you want and then get him to do it. This is V Race or something. Awesome video, Robert. We just got a new puppy 2 weeks ago, and it's our first dog. We are crate training him now and already loves this crate. My sister-in-law, who is from Sweden, accuses us of animal abuse because people in Sweden, animal rights nuts are nuts. They're complete. Now, your sister might be a nice person, but if she's buying into this BS hype that crates are animal abuse, she's a nut. She accuses us of animal abuse. My girlfriend took this very hard. Well, your girlfriend's a good person, so don't let her buy into this because your sister-in-law is a nut. It was very stressful on us more than anything, but seeing this reassures us. Thank you. Yeah, let me tell you something. Okay, your nutty friends in Sweden, and I've got a lot of fans in Sweden, aren't able to solve behavioral problems, and they're really abusing dogs by not giving them structure and not giving them corrections. It ticks me off because they come about holier than thou, that they're such a refined society and all this crap. They're not. If you don't give a dog structure, you don't teach him to be in a crate, you're a dope. That's it. Clausen says, could you help with the new behavior? Neutered before I got him, house trained for 9 months, never lifted leg before, neighbor had him for a week, now he marks outside and inside. I've corrected him inside, but he still marks inside sometimes. This is my first dog and I don't know what to do. It's a tough one, right? So what you're going to, I don't know what your neighbor did to your dog, but what you need to do is you're going to need to get the dog, you're going to need to keep an eye on the dog. So wherever the dog is marked, wherever he's marked, you need to go get yourself a gallon of Nature's Miracle or some kind of an enzymatic cleaner, and you're going to need to soak it. If it's furniture, soak it. If it's carpet, soak it. If it's furniture, soak it. If it's drapes, get rid of them. You don't need drapes. You need to get the dog to not have that smell anywhere in the house, and then you need to watch him. You need to take him as soon as he goes near something, he starts smelling, go, hey, get out of there, and correct him. You need to be vigilant. And if you can't watch him, put him in a crate. And forget these people from Sweden who are pissed off about crates, because it doesn't matter. That's the only way you're going to fix that. But you need to get on it. You need to get on it today. The last question, very, very last question, is from Mark. Hello, Robert. So I have never had a dog in a crate. Dalmatian, Blue Heeler, Siberians, Pit Stiff. I will now have 2 Malleys. Bad idea. Bad idea to get 2 Malinois. I really appreciate your videos. I do have a full-time job, but my wife and I have different schedules. I'm dedicated to making these purebred Malleys lifetime companions. It's going to be hard. I don't know why you get 2 Malinois. I don't know why. Why? Why 2? Right? Why? You're not going to be able to bond with them properly. You're not going to be able to train them properly. They don't really have an off button. Of course they don't have an off button, because Malinois don't have off buttons. That's just the way it is. I will watch all your videos since I have 2 at the end of June. Since I have 2, I don't know what that means. Any advice with integration with my 7-year-old 60-pound coyote mutt? Great dog. Man, Mark, you've got yourself into a pickle. What I would try to do is I would pick the Malinois you like and get the other one and rehome it. I would try to find a home for it. You're not going to have an easy time with this. And then you're trying to integrate it with a coyote mutt mix. You're absolutely, I'm going to tell you something, my friend, you're crazy. That's the best I can tell you. I think you're setting yourself up for a huge failure. I want you to be my fan. I want you to watch my videos. And they say there's no such thing as a stupid question. And this is not a stupid question. By the way, I don't ever tell people to ask stupid questions, because a stupid question is a question you don't ask. This is an intelligent question because you're reaching out to me for help. And here's my advice to you. Take these 2 Malinois, find the one that bonds most to you. Get a good home for the other one. Even if you've had them for a month or 2, get a home for the other one, because you're going to have a much better relationship. These 2 dogs will they'll gang up on your coyote mutt, or the coyote mutt will pick on one of them. You're making your life a sheer and utter hell by doing this. So please think about this. Think about it really carefully. And that wraps up the 50th podcast, number 50, episode number 50. Thank you so much, you guys, for making this possible, for your friendship, for your love, for your support, for letting me be a part of your training. I appreciate you guys very, very, very much. I thank you very, very much. Please check out my website, robertcabral.com. Check out my Amazon store, which you can get to all the products I talk about. You can go to the link on my page. Will link you to the Amazon store. If you buy anything there, I get a small commission that supports the podcast. My membership section, great place to go. Great lessons there. Great stuff to learn for your dog. Follow me on YouTube, everywhere else. And I thank you guys for being here, and I will see you on the next show.